Good morning, brothers and sisters. Thank you for being here. I'm Bishop Paul Anger from Pima's Second Ward. I just wanted to express my love and appreciation for all of you, and Sister Cluff, I just want you to know that I've visited with several throughout the ward, and they expressed their love and they wanted to be here, and they just wanted to let you and all of your family know that they are here in spirit.
Thank you.
That they love you and they wish they could be here with you. I'll be presiding and conducting this service. Our pianist is Sister Sarah Runyon, and our chorus will be Emily Ann Cluff. We'll have an opening hymn by the family. Families can be together forever. After which Brother Jonathan Reedhead will give our invocation. Our service will continue with Sister Sarah Runyon playing Full of Love on the keyboard. And then we'll have our life story by Brother Michael Cluff. And then we'll be followed with a musical number by Boyd Cluff singing I Stand All Amazed. And we'll continue from there.
can almost read that. Sarah, thank you so much for that beautiful musical number. Grandpa loved to listen to Sarah play the piano. From a very young age, she used to play for him. And so, also, thank you, Jonathan, for that beautiful invocation. We appreciate that. My brothers and sisters, some of you very literally, I'm so glad that you're here with us today. I hope you'll bear with me. I'm going to talk for a little while about my dad. Philip Cluff was born May 4th, 1951. 1941. I already made a mistake. To Claude Archibald Cluff and Elsie McBride Cluff. Claude worked in the mines in Bisbee, Arizona, and that is where he and Elsie lived when their firstborn son, Philip, was born. Philip was followed by 4 siblings, Ruth, Cal, Archie, and Judy. Philip started elementary school in Tombstone, Arizona. Soon after, the family moved to Central Arizona, where Philip's dad worked on a church farm. Philip and his sister Ruth spent a lot of time together as youngsters. Ruth said she was kind of a tomboy, and Philip and Ruth especially liked to go to the irrigation ditch, where Philip made roads in the ditch bank for the cars to drive on. Ruth said that was when he started thinking about becoming a civil engineer. Philip showed Ruth how to tie a thread to a June bug and fly it around like an airplane. When Philip was 11 years old, the family moved to a small adobe house on 200 East Street in Pima. That's the home that Audrey lives in now. At that time, the house had just a small living room, 3 very small bedrooms, and a tiny kitchen. To access the bathroom, you had to go out the back door, and enter the bathroom from the back porch. Philip delivered the newspaper early every morning on his bicycle, and in the afternoons and the weekends he collected payment for the subscriptions. The family had a menagerie of animals: ducks, geese, turkeys, horses, cows, pigs, rabbits, chickens, and many, many kinds of fruit trees, plus a couple of acres planted usually in barley. Archie said as the oldest son, the weight of responsibility for caring for the farm fell mostly on Philip. When Philip and Ruth were teenagers, they spent summers up on Mount Graham. They hiked down to Slick Rock and up to Webb Peak to climb the fire tower. They climbed on Big Rock between Columbine and Soldier Creek and climbed down into the ice caves, notwithstanding the danger posed by rattlesnakes. Ruth remembers Philip liked to accompany her to Soldier Creek, where the young women had their girls' camps going on. So Philip could flirt with the girls, I imagine. Ruth said she loved those summers. She loved riding horses on the mountain with Philip, and she loved picnicking and hiking, and Philip always took good care of her when they did those activities. Philip's youngest sibling, Judy, told me that Philip would often carry her around on his shoulders. She said Philip was very kind to her. She said Cal was the tease. Once Judy couldn't walk due to blisters on her feet, so Philip and Cal made a bed for Judy on a brick carrier, kind of like a wheelbarrow, and they wheeled her down to the wash so that they could play. Philip's brother Archie said he once got so mad at his brother Philip that he hit Philip on the head with a hammer while Philip was taking a nap. Now, Archie told me he didn't think it was a very big hammer because it didn't do any permanent damage. But he said that Philip didn't remember the incident, so maybe he did more damage than he thought. I asked Archie if maybe that thump on Dad's melon might have made him kind of that stubborn guy that he became, and he said, "Don't blame that on me. He got that from his dad." I asked Aunt Ruth if Dad was nice to her. She answered sometimes he was nice. Ruth said once Philip teased her so bad that she ran into her room and locked the door so he couldn't get in. But the door had swollen, and she slammed the door so hard that the door got stuck and she couldn't get out. So she had to climb out the window. She also told me, though, that Philip was very compassionate. When he was in junior high and high school, he had a friend who suffered from dwarfism. I'm not sure of this young man's name, and she couldn't remember, so we'll call him John. John was picked on a lot, but Philip became close friends with John. They spent a lot of time together. Once there was a formal dance at the high school, and none of the girls would agree to go to the dance with John. So Philip asked his sister Ruth if she would be willing to be John's date. And Ruth agreed and went to the dance with him. Philip attended Pima High School, where he played football and basketball, and he played the cornet in the school band. I don't know how much of an athlete Dad was, but I do remember watching Dad lace up a pair of tennis shoes in preparation for a basketball game in the City League when we lived in Williams, Arizona. To be honest, I wasn't that impressed by his ball skills, but I was impressed that he knew how to put on a pair of tennis shoes, because I had never seen him wear a pair of tennis shoes before, only boots. Philip graduated with a class of 1959 in a senior class consisting of 19 students. After graduation, Philip attended the Eastern Arizona Junior College in Thatcher. At about that time, the church announced a change in the age of missionary service from 21 years of age to 19 years of age. So at the age of 19, Philip was called to serve in the Mexico Northern Mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In those days, missionaries served for 2.5 years. Missionary training was a week long, and Spanish was learned by immersion. Philip grew up with a dislike of beans, but the poor people of Mexico ate little else, so he learned to like them. Beans actually became one of his favorite meals. He worked in areas so remote, he often had to ride in on horseback. Philip didn't mind that one bit, but some of his poor companions didn't like it so much. Philip's youngest sister, Judy, recalls the family didn't know when Philip was coming home from his mission. So Philip rode a bus home and arrived in Pima one Sunday while the family was in church. When the family got home, they couldn't open the front door. And that's because Philip was crouching down behind the door, holding the door closed so he could surprise everybody. Judy said the funny thing is Philip couldn't speak a word of English. He said it took him about a week before his English returned, and even then it wasn't very good English. And he said that Philip hadn't purchased any clothing while he was on his mission, and his suits were threadbare, so much so that it was white around the pockets of his suit from the thread showing through. Upon returning home, Philip once again attended Eastern Arizona Junior College for a semester. While he was there, he attended the Green and Gold Ball, which was a formal dance at the Institute. While setting up for the dance, Philip climbed up a ladder to help set up decorations. A pretty young lady came over to the bottom of that ladder and started handing up streamers for Philip to hang. Philip must have asked his date about her, and his date was probably a little jealous of his interest. His date told him this Betty Olson was from Safford, and she said some unkind things about her. Just piqued Philip's interest. So, a short time later, he asked Betty on a date to find out about all those unkind things. Philip and Betty went to a dance, and Betty thought it was funny that Philip had such a hard time speaking English, so I think that's true. Philip used one phrase over and over, which was, "¿Quieres bailar conmigo?" which means, "Will you dance with me?" Philip was quite a good dancer, and Betty was impressed. Philip and Betty continued to date. On one memorable occasion, Philip borrowed his brother Cal's motorboat. They pulled the boat out to Cluff Ponds, which is not very much water for a boat, and went for a boat ride, and they had a really nice time. When it came time to pull the boat out of the water, you might have a hard time believing this, but Betty was worried about him backing that boat trailer into the water, so she chose to stand on the shore and watch from a safe location. And Philip backed the trailer up, and he backed up, and he kept backing, and he kept backing, and pretty soon the only thing showing above the water was a few inches of the cab of the truck. And Betty wasn't sure what to think, and just about then Philip came bubbling up from under the water and waded out to shore. Now it's worth noting that Philip said it was just like waist deep, but Mom says that she saw his head come up out of the water, so he was in there pretty good apparently. Anyway, they were stuck. They were stuck out at the ponds. They didn't have a ride home, and they had to just kind of wait until somebody came by, and then they got a ride home and eventually pulled that old truck out. Philip and Betty became an item, and Philip's mother was not all that impressed by this Safford girl whose father was not a member of the church, and she tried to talk Philip out of marrying her, at least right away. She wanted Philip to finish his education first, and she thought having a wife would get in the way of that. But Philip was in love and Philip wasn't going to listen anyway. So he asked Betty to marry him, and they were married, thank goodness, for time and all eternity in the Mesa, Arizona temple on March 27, 1964. Philip and his bride moved into an apartment at the University of Arizona in Tucson. Philip got a job working at a dairy, and he kept busy with work and school. He served as the financial clerk in the Spanish-American branch in Tucson. At that time, he volunteered to serve as the scoutmaster of that branch with a small troop of Spanish-speaking Mexican boys. None of the boys' parents had cars, so Philip and sometimes Betty would drive around and pick them up for their weekly scout meetings. In 1965, Philip and Betty became the proud parents of their firstborn daughter, Melinda Ray. Is that right?
66.
Man, I got two of them wrong now. 1966. Dad made $1 an hour at the dairy. And that year, Dad and Mom made a gross income of $3,000. Melinda came into the world with a few complications, and the hospital bill came to $2,000. You do the math. Philip was a proud father, and he doted on Melinda, and he was quite proud of her. My Uncle Archie recalled Philip's visit home to show off his new daughter as one of Archie's fondest memories of Philip and Betty. Philip, he worked hard, and he studied late into the night. He was determined to graduate, and fitting school and work and scouts and church service in was not easy, but he did graduate with a bachelor's degree in civil engineering. He was immediately hired by the USDA Forest Service, and he moved his family to Monte Vista, Colorado. Another daughter, Lorene Elsie, came along a few months later. Thanks to a generous health insurance plan, Lorene's birth only cost about $4. Pretty big difference there. What a bargain. Philip loved the outdoors, and working in the mountains and the forest fit him like a glove. In order to promote to a higher pay grade, though, he was required to move to other forests. So a year later, he moved the family to Colville, Washington. While in Colville, Philip and Betty welcomed a son, Michael Philip, into the family. Michael was the most beautiful and perfectly mannered baby I ever seen. And he was by far Philip's favorite. After a short stint in Washington, Philip and Betty packed up the family and moved to Hamilton, Montana. Philip finally was able to buy enough land to have a farm. Melinda and Lorene remember with great fondness their time in Montana on a farm with a menagerie of animals. Dad doted on his daughters and his son. He was always an early riser, and so was Melinda. So Dad would often take Melinda with him early in the morning as he milked the cow and did the other chores. While in Montana, Richard Mack joined the family. Richard was to be Philip and Betty's youngest child. Philip and Betty were very active in the church, and in short order, Philip was called to be the scoutmaster. There's a big surprise. A responsibility he took very seriously. Philip loved scouting. He worked with young men, and he was proud to help several young men earn the rank of Eagle Scout. He attended the 1973 National Scout Jamboree in Idaho, which must have made a big impression on Dad because he wore that jamboree belt buckle with his scout uniform for pretty much the rest of his life. Philip and Betty made lifelong friends in Montana, but the time came to move again. In 1973, the family picked up and moved to Williams, Arizona. While in Williams, Philip continued his work with the Boy Scouts, and he was called to be the branch president of the Williams branch of the church. During the summers, Philip was assigned to work on the north rim of the Grand Canyon. He and Betty bought a tiny travel trailer and some tents and moved the family out into the forest where we camped for the summer. Dad made some furniture out of old ponderosa logs with his chainsaw, and he stored that furniture in the woods so that each summer when we returned we could still use it. And Dad had to go off occasionally to fight forest fires, and Mom would hold down the fort. And I'm not sure what Mom's true feelings were about living in the woods, but us kids had a great time. After a 5-year stay in Williams, the family packed up and moved again, this time to Los Lunas, New Mexico. This move was good for Philip. He was once again able to purchase a home where he could have some land and follow up with his farming pursuits. He began collecting animals, and he planted a huge garden, and he still served in scouting, and he served in the bishopric, and he served in the High Council, among other callings. Philip became very involved in scouting at the district level and became a chapter advisor in the Order of the Arrow, which is an honor unit in the Boy Scouts of America. Philip was awarded the Silver Beaver Award, which is a significant honor in the Boy Scouts. Philip was also awarded Vigil Honor status in the Order of the Arrow. It was while in Los Lunas that Michael and Richard were finally able to participate in Boy Scouts with their dad. Both boys earned their Eagle Scout awards, and both eventually are also awarded Vigil Honor status along with their dad in the Order of the Arrow. Philip attended Wood Badge training and became involved in teaching other Scouters as part of Wood Badge staff. I think I should mention here that it was very hard on my mother and my sisters to have Dad gone all the time with the Scouts. Dad often used all of his vacation time to take Scouts hiking and camping, and he had very strong feelings against taking his young sons with him until they were of age to be Scouts themselves. This means Mom had to stay home and take care of disappointed children while Dad went on adventures with somebody else's sons. This did not ever seem to deter Philip, and I don't think it's exaggerating to say that he influenced thousands of young men during his 66 years of service in the Boy Scouts of America. So I thought a lot about this, and I decided I'm going to broach the subject. I love my dad, but he was not perfect. My dad was the most stubborn man I ever met, and he would never admit when he was wrong. Let me give you an example. Dad liked dogs. He bad-mouthed cats. One day I walked outside on the front porch, and I caught Dad sitting on the front porch, baby talking to a little kitty cat, petting it, talking to it. And I laughed and I said, "Dad, I thought you didn't like cats." And he said, "I don't." And he threw the cat up on the roof. So a lot happened in Los Lunas. We spent a lot of years there. It was during these years that all four of his children attended junior high and high school and graduated from high school. Melinda and Lorraine were married, and Michael and Richard left to serve missions for the church. It was also during this time that Philip was stricken with diabetes. Philip was always active. He worked hard, and he hiked many, many miles for work and for fun. And the diabetes diagnosis was really hard on him. It's my belief that he began to show some symptoms of depression as a result. The effects of diabetes and likely depression, combined with his stubbornness, sometimes made Dad grumpy and somewhat disagreeable. Dad always was a good father and husband, but the disease really started to take its toll in my eyes, and Dad's demeanor slowly began to change. Philip retired from the Forest Service after 29 years of employment there, and Mom and Dad sold their house and moved out to the ranch near Rincon, New Mexico. Soon thereafter, Philip and Betty served a full-time mission in the Bilbao, Spain mission. Mom said that Dad refused to learn how to speak Spanish the way they speak it in Spain, because the only correct way to speak Spanish is how they do it in Mexico. Dad also was the only full-time missionary I ever knew to wear both a cowboy hat and cowboy boots with his suit and tie in the entire mission. When Mom and Dad returned from that mission, they bought a place in Rincon so Dad could fulfill his dream of being a full-time cowboy. Some of the older grandchildren remember with great fondness their times on the ranch and in Rincon. Melinda's daughter Sarah remembers bucking hay with her grandpa and learning to ride horses with grandpa. Janelle says she remembers begging grandpa to let her run the horses as they were riding one day. Grandpa finally responded by slapping his horse into a and yelling probably a big yeah, and poor Janelle's horses started to bolt, and she had to grab leather and hold on for dear life, and Dad just laughed and laughed. He thought that was his funniest thing, and Janelle thought she was going to die. Dad loved to laugh. His laugh was infectious. One day, Dad and Grandpa Philip Cluff were riding horses with my mom at the ranch, and it had just rained. It was a big rainstorm, and there was a flooded area that they had to go through. As the horses waded through the water, Dad and Grandpa watched as Mom's horse began to sweep its head back and forth in the water. Well, Dad and Grandpa knew that this horse was showing signs that it was about to lay down, but they didn't tell Mom. And they laughed themselves silly when that horse laid down in the water and soaking Mom from head to toe in the process. While in Rincon, Dad was again called to serve as a branch president for the Hatch, New Mexico branch. Dad was a busy man, and he worked hard at being a rancher, but because of his diabetes, Mom worried about him all the time when he was off alone at the ranch, and after a few years it became obvious that they would need to make a change. The ranch was sold, and Mom and Dad moved to Pima, Arizona in about 2001. Mom and Dad built a house next door to the house where Dad had grown up. The house was built purposely large so there would be room for grandchildren and family gatherings. Dad and Mom were called to be temple workers for several years. They traveled to Mesa every 2 weeks to serve in the temple. Dad loved his temple service. He learned all of the ordinances in English and in Spanish. Dad and Mom really rejoiced when the Gila Valley Temple was built, and they were able to serve in the temple just 5 minutes from their house. His grandchildren went to the temple often to perform baptisms for the dead, and their grandpa almost always came into the baptistry to perform confirmations with them. One of Philip's grandkids wondered how he always knew they were there. Well, I know the answer to that. Dad was so proud of his grandchildren that it didn't take very long before the baptistry workers recognized when Philip's grandchildren came through the door. And so they went and found Dad and let him know so he could join them. The temple was so important to Dad. It brought him great joy. In my conversations with him, the three principal things he talked about were scouting, his garden, and the temple. Philip had a tremendous testimony of the gospel of Jesus Christ. He obeyed the word of wisdom. His language was always clean. Dad always sustained the prophet and did whatever he was asked to do in the church. I never heard my dad speak ill of a church leader, never. Dad paid a full tithing his whole life, and he firmly believed that he was greatly blessed because of it. Dad and Mom were very involved in the lives of their grandchildren, especially those who lived in the Gila Valley. Jonathan, Sarah, and Darren, as the first grandchildren, visited their grandparents all the time and spent weeks at a time with them. The house in Pima became a gathering point for the whole family, and it was common for grandchildren to come in and out all day long. Sarah shared some experiences with her grandpa about her grandpa, and it illustrates perfectly the kind of grandpa he was. Quote, "Grandpa and me up before sunrise, he making eggs and chorizo, and me sitting at the counter watching and talking. He used to tease me about sticking my tongue out while I played piano, and for dancing while I eat. He used to make me rice cereal for breakfast, and every Saturday he would make surprise pancakes, and we would have to guess what he added. He took me out to the ranch with him and taught me how to ride a horse, round up and brand cattle, and how to successfully drink out of a gallon jug with mostly ice and a little water, melting away through the day in the hot truck. He had beaded seats in his truck, and he drove with the windows down to let in the wind. He and I used to go out and irrigate, even in the middle of the night, and then buck the hay once it was baled. I used to sit and play the piano for him and Grandma, and he would cry. I got my emotions from him, and we could cry together during a sappy, happy movie," end quote. Jacob said he was always kind of jealous of his cousins from the Gila Valley because they got to know Grandpa and Grandma so well. "I wish I could share some memories from every grandchild, and I know there are so many, but suffice it to say that Grandpa Cluff deeply loved his grandkids, and he was very proud of each and every one." Some of Dad's favorite things: cowboy hats, homemade ice cream, cowboy boots, the mountains, especially Mount Graham, strawberry milkshakes, photography, sharp pocket knives, Louis L'Amour books, the temple, the Boy Scouts of America, tamales, dairy cows, backpacking, a good cow horse, I can't say it, Sudoku puzzles, neckerchief slides, chorizo and eggs, fresh homegrown tomatoes, Taylin, dancing, tying knots, grandchild performances, crying during movies, a good dog, Klondike derbies, a way too big garden, livestock auctions, butter, not margarine, camping, horseplay, peanut brittle, corn tortillas, Order of the Arrow Conclaves, Philmont Scout Ranch, seed catalogs, and cowboy songs. The scriptures teach us that we can know somebody by their fruits. Some of Grandpa and Grandma's fruits are as follows. Philip and Betty's two sons both serve Spanish-speaking full-time missions for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. All four of Philip and Betty's children were married to their respective spouse in the Mesa, Arizona temple, where Mom and Dad were sealed 56 years ago. Philip and Betty have 23 grandchildren, 19 living and 4 who have passed on as infants, and 15 great-grandchildren. 7 grandchildren have served full-time missions so far. 9 sons and grandsons have earned the rank of Eagle Scout. 13 daughters and granddaughters have earned the Young Women's Recognition Award. 9 grandchildren have been sealed to their respective spouses in the temple so far. On April 5th, 2020, Dad and Mom enjoyed a beautiful Sunday watching a historic general conference on television. That evening, the bishop came to the house and interviewed Dad and renewed his temple recommend. That evening, I called to talk to Mom. Dad picked up the phone without talking to me and dutifully handed it to Mom. I wish he had talked to me, but that was not unusual. After that phone call, Dad sat at the kitchen table next to his tomato seedlings in the window and quietly played Sudoku puzzles. Right before bed, he went outside to put the animals in for the night, as he did every night. As he walked back to the house, he collapsed and died. A reunion was called in heaven. Dad's mother and father greeted him with hugs. He was met by his brother, Cal. He likely held 4 grandchildren closely on his lap. I like to think some very special dogs were anxious to greet him, and some farm animals, and maybe even a cat. Imagine with me what a wonderful experience this has been for Grandpa. My brothers and sisters, I want to close. There's so much more I could talk about, and I've talked long enough, but I want to close by bearing my testimony to you. Grandpa was a great example. He loved his children. He loved his wife dearly. He protected her. He provided well for her. And he felt this to be his sacred responsibility. He loved his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren. He loved them fiercely. He loved the gospel of Jesus Christ. He was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, a bearer of the Melchizedek priesthood. He honored that priesthood. He followed the prophet. He kept the commandments of God. He wasn't perfect, but he repented. He returned over and over and over and over again to the temple, a place where he served God in a capacity that he loved. We will all miss him dearly. But we also know where he is. We know that his spirit left that body, and that someday it will return because of a living Jesus Christ. Dad believed in Jesus Christ. He trusted in him. He taught his children to trust in him. And he showed us by example how to do so. Thank you so much for being here to show him your love. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. What?
Take the little one too.
This is what he needs.
I stand all amazed at the love Jesus offers me, confused at the grace that so fully He proffers me. I tremble to know that for me He was crucified, that for me, a sinner, He suffered, He bled and died. Oh, it is wonderful that He should care for me enough to die for me. Oh, it is wonderful, wonderful to me. I marvel that He would descend from His throne divine to rescue a soul so rebellious and proud as mine, that He should extend His great love unto such as I, sufficient to own, to redeem, and to justify. Oh, it is wonderful that He should care for me enough to die for me. Oh, it is wonderful, wonderful. I think of His hands, pierced and bleeding to pay the debt. Such mercy, such love, and devotion can I forget? No, no, I will praise and adore at the mercy seat, until at the glorified throne I kneel at His feet. Oh, it is wonderful that He should care for me enough to die for me. Oh, it is wonderful. Oh, He is wonderful, wonderful to me.
Brothers and sisters, if you'll forgive me and give me an opportunity to share just a few remarks. I want to thank all of those that participated with the beautiful music. That was wonderful. And Brother Michael, I know exactly where you get your sense of humor from. He did a great job with his life story and sharing that. Brothers and sisters, we each of us lived with our heavenly parents before we came to this earth. They had a plan for us to come down and to learn and grow. And a part of that plan was that we could teach and love those that were with us and to build a family. And when I think of Brother Cluff, I think of two very specific images in my mind. I was involved with scouting, scoutmaster, assistant scoutmaster for about 14 years. And I have a vivid image of that outfit and him being there for those young men. And I remember a lot of times him taking those young men aside, one-on-one, and visiting with them. And so, Sister Cluff, I want you to know he did make an impact. Those times when he was away with those other people's young men was very important. He did a really good job with that, and I know he loved that and enjoyed it. My other image is going to the temple. We all know when you go to the temple, you feel that love of our Savior and those around you, but it was just something special to walk in and see Brother Cluff there with that grin. And I think, you know, he just, when he recognizes you, he gives you that grin, and I think those are two very special images that I have of him. And I'm still trying to work on him wearing tennis shoes, though. That's going to be a tough one to put together. But brothers and sisters, I want you to know that I'm thankful for the gospel, the understanding we have, and to know that he did so much here on this earth, that he showed his love. I don't know about throwing the cat, but he showed his love for people and animals, and his love and appreciation of what our Heavenly Father and our Savior created for us to live here. Just one final thought. I was reading in Matthew the parable of the talents, and I had to just kind of think of Brother Cluff as I read that. He was one of those that was blessed with a sharp mind and ideas and abilities, and I think above all else, that's what he did, is he shared those understandings and ideas and that knowledge with those around him. What a great heritage and a great memory that so many of us have, and so many that we don't even know about, that they have that knowledge and that understanding from Brother Cluff, from simple thing as tying knots. But what a special man. I had, when I was reading in Matthew 25, it talks about the talents, and one of the most touching comments is, "Well done, thy good and faithful servant." And I think that applies so much to him. Well done. He was a good servant for the Lord, and we love and appreciate him. I had a very special evening the day he passed. Got to watch conference, as many of you did, and set up a quick impromptu appointment, because I know Sister Cluff was worried about him having his temple recommended, even with the temples closed, but I wanted to make sure and get over there and visit with him. And it's probably one of the best visits we've ever had. We talked for 30-40 minutes, talked about his family, talked about behind the house there, as I grew up across the field there, and talked about, of course, scouting and the temple. Just a wonderful man, and I want you to know I love and appreciate him and all he did for me personally, and for scouting, and for the ward. Good man. And I leave that with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen. We'll continue. Brother Richard Cluff will dedicate the grave, and afterwards Caden Shiflett will give us a presentation of taps, and we'll conclude the service.